I stood frozen in my living room as my son Derek unbuckled his leather belt, his wife Jessica recording everything on her phone. "Sign the power of attorney now, Mom, or this gets ugly," Derek snarled, doubling the belt in his hands. My arthritic fingers trembled as I reached for the pen lying next to the legal documents on my coffee table. 23 years of raising Derek alone after his father died, working double shifts as a hospital janitor to pay for his college education, sacrificing vacations and new clothes and decent meals. Jessica laughed coldly from her position by the window. "Finally, everything will be ours. The house, her savings, even that insurance payout from when Dad died." The doorbell rang unexpectedly sharp and insistent through our tense silence. Jessica's confident smirk vanished as she approached the front door. Through the peephole, I glimpsed her shoulders stiffen before she slowly turned the deadbolt. My mind raced faster than it had in months, clearer somehow than the foggy confusion that had been plaguing me lately. Something about the immediate threat had burned through whatever haze had been clouding my thoughts. "Mrs. Rodriguez." A woman's professional voice carried through the partially open door. "I'm Detective Sarah Morrison from the Elder Abuse Division. I received a concerning report about this address." Derek dropped the belt behind the couch cushions so quickly I almost missed the movement. Jessica's phone disappeared into her back pocket with practiced efficiency. Both of them transformed their expressions from predatory to caring within seconds. "Oh, Detective, thank goodness you're here!" Jessica gushed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We've been so worried about Amanda. She's been having these episodes lately where she gets confused and agitated." Derek stepped closer to me, placing what appeared to be a protective hand on my shoulder. His fingers dug into my collarbone with enough pressure to remind me of the consequences of speaking truthfully. "Mom's been struggling since her last fall. We're just trying to help her manage her affairs before she hurts herself." Detective Morrison stepped inside her sharp eyes, scanning the room. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her navy blue jacket bore the county sheriff's insignia, and she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to dealing with family secrets. "Mrs. Rodriguez, how are you feeling today?" she asked directly, ignoring Derek and Jessica's hovering presence. I opened my mouth to respond, then caught Derek's warning glare. The old Amanda would have deferred to her son, trusted his judgment about what was best for everyone. But something had shifted during those terrifying moments with the belt. The fog in my mind had lifted enough for me to recognize that my own son was threatening me with violence. "I'm managing, Detective," I said carefully, "though I must admit I've been feeling more clear-headed today than I have in weeks." Jessica's laugh sounded forced. "She has good days and bad days. Yesterday she couldn't remember where she put her medication." "What medication would that be?" Detective Morrison pulled out a small notebook. "Just some blood pressure pills and supplements for her arthritis," Derek answered quickly. "Nothing major, but when she forgets to take them, she gets dizzy and disoriented." I touched the medical alert pendant hanging around my neck, the one I'd activated 20 minutes earlier when Derek first grabbed the belt. The device company had assured me it recorded ambient sound for 30 seconds after each activation. Everything Derek and Jessica had said about taking everything I owned, everything about forcing me to sign documents, all of it captured on their servers. Detective Morrison noticed my gesture. "That's a smart precaution, Mrs. Rodriguez. How long have you had that device?" "About 6 months," I replied. "Ever since I moved in with Derek and Jessica." "Moved in?" Detective Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. "This is your house, though, isn't it?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. Derek shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Mom decided she wanted us closer after her health scares started," Jessica interjected. It made more sense for us to move in here than for her to leave the neighborhood she loves. Detective Morrison walked slowly around the living room, taking note of family photos, the stack of legal documents still spread across the coffee table, the pen I'd been forced to hold. Her trained eye caught details I hadn't even noticed myself, the small dent in the wall where Derek had punched it last week, the broken picture frame Jessica had swept under the side table after one of their arguments about money. Mrs. Rodriguez, when was the last time you spoke with any friends or other family members? I had to think about that question longer than I should have. When had I last called my sister in Phoenix? When had Margaret from down the street stopped by for coffee? The timeline felt blurry, like trying to remember a dream after waking up. I don't really know, I admitted. It feels like it's been a while. She doesn't like to use the phone anymore, Derek explained. Gets confused about who she's calling. Detective Morrison made another note. And the power of attorney documents I see here. When did you decide those were necessary? Just today, I said before Derek could answer. Derek brought them home and said I needed to sign them for my own protection. Have you had a chance to review them with your own attorney? Jessica stepped forward. Amanda doesn't have her own lawyer anymore. She had to let him go because of the expense. That wasn't true. I'd been working with Harold Simpson for 15 years, ever since my husband died. Harold had helped me navigate the insurance settlement, set up my savings accounts, even helped Derek with college financial aid applications. I hadn't let Harold go. I suddenly realized I hadn't seen or spoken to Harold in months. Detective Morrison handed me her business card. Mrs. Rodriguez, I'd like you to keep this somewhere safe. If you ever need to reach me directly, you can call that number anytime, day or night. Derek's grip on my shoulder tightened. Detective, we appreciate your concern, but as you can see, Mom is well cared for here. I'm sure she is. Detective Morrison's tone remained professionally neutral, but something in her expression told me she'd seen enough to form her own conclusions. I'll be checking back in a few days to see how everyone is doing. After she left, the house fell into an uncomfortable silence. Derek paced between the kitchen and living room, while Jessica peered through the front curtains to make sure the detective's car had actually driven away. What did you do? Derek finally exploded, spinning to face me. Did you call the police on us? I didn't call anyone, I said truthfully. The medical alert company had protocols about when to contact emergency services, but I hadn't directly called the police myself. Someone did, Jessica snapped. Cops don't just show up randomly asking about elder abuse. Derek's face flushed red with anger. If you've screwed this up for us, Mom, I swear to God! You'll what? The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. You'll hit me with that belt. You'll force me to sign papers I haven't read. What exactly will you do that you weren't already planning? Both of them stared at me in shock. I'd been compliant and confused for months. This version of Amanda, the one asking direct questions and refusing to be intimidated, caught them completely off guard. We're trying to help you, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. By threatening me with violence? Nobody threatened violence, Derek protested. I was just trying to get your attention. I looked at the belt still partially hidden behind the couch cushions. Is that what we're calling it? The fog that had been clouding my mind for weeks continued to clear. I began to understand that my confusion, my forgetfulness, my dizzy spells hadn't been symptoms of aging or illness. They'd been symptoms of something else entirely. That evening, I pretended to take my usual medications with the chamomile tea Jessica prepared for me every night. Instead, I palmed the pills and disposed of them in the bathroom, then poured most of the tea down the sink when she wasn't watching. For the first time in months, I stayed awake past 9 o'clock. The house settled into its familiar nighttime creaks and sighs. Derek and Jessica thought I was sleeping off another dose of whatever they'd been giving me. Instead, I crept to the top of the stairs and listened to their conversation in the kitchen below. Phase 2 has to happen this weekend, Derek was saying. If that detective comes back and finds out Mom's been lucid this whole time, we're screwed. Jessica's voice carried clearly up the stairwell. The nursing home placement papers are already signed. We just need her signature on the financial power of attorney, and we can move forward with selling this place. What about the insurance money from Dad? She hasn't touched that account in 3 years. $800,000 just sitting there, plus the equity in this house, probably another $400,000 in this market. Her Social Security and pension payments can cover the nursing home fees. I gripped the banister to keep myself steady. My husband's life insurance payout had been meant to secure my retirement to ensure I never became a burden on anyone. Derek and Jessica were planning to steal every penny. The gambling debts won't wait much longer, Derek continued. Tony's guys made it clear what happens if I don't pay up by Monday. Your shopping credit card bills are maxed out too, Derek shot back. Don't act like this is all my problem. At least my debts won't get us killed. I crept back to my bedroom, my mind racing. The next morning, while Derek was at work and Jessica ran errands, I searched through Derek's car in the garage. Hidden under the spare tire, I found a manila folder containing documents I'd never seen before. Reverse mortgage application in my name with a forged signature that looked remarkably like my handwriting. Applications for 3 different credit cards, all signed with variations of my name. A contract with Sunset Manor Care Facility showing they'd already paid a deposit for my placement in their memory care unit. The memory care unit. They were planning to have me declared incompetent. I photographed every document with the smartphone Derek had given me for emergencies. He'd taught me to use the camera function, never imagining I'd turn it against him. The reverse mortgage application alone would have given them access to hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity while saddling me with debt I'd never be able to repay. In Jessica's purse, I discovered receipts for expensive clothing and jewelry purchases made with credit cards I didn't recognize. The billing statements showed my name and address, but I'd never applied for or received these cards. They'd been intercepting my mail for months, opening accounts in my name, and running up debts I'd never authorized. The sleeping medication bottles in their bedroom medicine cabinet told another part of the story. Prescription bottles with my name on them, but filled with pills I'd never taken. The pharmacy records showed Derek picking up my prescriptions, but I'd never given him permission to collect my medications. I started to understand the timeline of my confusion. It had begun gradually about 6 months after Derek and Jessica moved in. First occasional dizziness that I attributed to my blood pressure medication, then memory lapses that seemed normal for someone my age. Finally, the deep confusion and disorientation that made me question my own judgment about everything. They'd been drugging me systematically, increasing the dosage as my tolerance built up. The evening tea ritual Jessica insisted on had been the delivery method. The prescription bottles showed they'd been picking up enough medication to keep me sedated around the clock. While I was discovering the depth of their deception, Derek returned home earlier than expected. I barely had time to return everything to its original hiding places before he walked through the kitchen door. "Where's Jessica?" he asked suspiciously. "Shopping, I think. She said something about groceries." Derek studied my face carefully. "You seem more alert today." "I feel better. Maybe those new vitamins are helping." He nodded, but I could see him calculating something behind his eyes. "Have you thought any more about those legal documents? It would really put my mind at ease if we could get that paperwork finished." "I'd like to have Harold Simpson look them over first." "Harold's retired, Mom. He's not taking new clients." That was another lie. I'd called Harold's office that morning and spoke with his secretary. He'd been trying to reach me for weeks but couldn't get through. When he'd stopped by the house, Derek had told him I was sleeping and couldn't be disturbed. "Maybe I could find a different lawyer then." Derek's jaw tightened. Why would you need a lawyer? Don't you trust me to look out for your interests? Of course I trust you, but these are important legal documents. I want to make sure I understand what I'm signing. The longer we wait, the more complicated this becomes. If something happens to you before we get this sorted out, Jessica and I won't be able to help manage your affairs. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Sign the papers willingly or they'd find another way to take control. That afternoon, while Derek was watching television in the living room, I called Margaret from my bedroom phone. Margaret had been my friend for 20 years, ever since we'd worked together in the hospital's administrative offices. She'd retired from her job as a legal secretary just before I retired from janitorial services. Amanda, sweetheart, I've been so worried about you, Margaret said as soon as she heard my voice. I stopped by twice last month, but Derek said you were too tired for visitors. I'm much better now. Actually, I was wondering if I could ask you some questions about legal documents, hypothetically. Margaret's experience with estate planning and elder law made her the perfect person to help me understand what Derek and Jessica were trying to accomplish. When I described the power of attorney documents, she immediately identified the potential for abuse. A general power of attorney gives Derek complete control over your finances, your property, even your medical decisions, Margaret explained. He could sell your house, empty your bank accounts, commit you to a care facility, anything he wanted. What if I signed it under duress? Then it wouldn't be legally valid. But proving duress can be difficult, especially if there's any question about your mental capacity. I told Margaret about the sleeping medications and my suspicions about being drugged. Her sharp intake of breath told me everything I needed to know. Amanda, that's elder abuse, financial elder abuse, and possibly criminal assault. You need to document everything and report this immediately. I wasn't ready to report anything yet. First, I needed to understand exactly how far Derek and Jessica were willing to go, and I needed evidence that would stand up in court. Over the next 3 days, I maintained the pretense of taking my evening medications while secretly staying alert throughout the nights. The clarity of thought that returned was both liberating and terrifying. I began to see how methodically Derek and Jessica had isolated me from the outside world. My computer had been moved to Derek's bedroom, supposedly, because I'd been having trouble remembering passwords. My car keys had disappeared months ago, with Jessica explaining that my reflexes weren't safe for driving anymore. Phone calls were screened with Derek or Jessica explaining to callers that I was napping or having a bad day. They'd created a perfect prison of apparent care and concern. Margaret agreed to meet me at the local library while Derek and Jessica thought I was attending a senior center program. The bus route I'd used for 40 years still ran on schedule, and the independence of traveling alone felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. You look better than you've sounded on the phone, Margaret observed as we settled at a quiet table in the library's reference section. I feel like I'm waking up from a bad dream. Margaret had brought a folder filled with information about elder abuse legal protections and resources for victims. The statistics were sobering. Families were responsible for 90% of elder abuse cases, and financial exploitation often preceded physical violence. The sleeping medication alone constitutes assault, Margaret explained. Giving someone drugs without their knowledge or consent is a felony in this state. What about the forged signatures on financial documents? Identity theft, fraud, possibly conspiracy charges if they're working together. Amanda, this is serious criminal behavior. I showed Margaret the photos I'd taken of the reverse mortgage application and credit card statements. Her expression grew darker as she reviewed each document. They've already stolen thousands of dollars from you. And if this reverse mortgage goes through, they'll have access to most of your home's equity while you're still responsible for the debt. Margaret helped me understand that Derek and Jessica had been running a sophisticated financial scam. The memory care facility placement was designed to remove me from my home while they liquidated my assets. Once I was declared incompetent, they could act on my behalf without any oversight. The gambling debts explain the timeline, Margaret noted. This isn't about long-term financial gain. They need money immediately, which makes them more dangerous. We developed a strategy for gathering evidence while protecting my safety. Margaret would help me open a new bank account that Derek and Jessica couldn't access. I would document every incident of coercion or abuse. Most importantly, I would continue pretending to be confused while secretly preparing to expose their scheme. "Do you think Derek would actually hurt me physically?" I asked. Margaret's pause told me everything. "Amanda, desperate people do desperate things. If he's in debt to dangerous people, he might see you as the only thing standing between him and serious consequences." That afternoon, I returned home to find Jessica going through my jewelry box. She was photographing my wedding ring, the diamond earrings my mother had left me, and the pearl necklace that had been my grandmother's. "Oh, Amanda, I was just cleaning and organizing your jewelry," Jessica said, quickly closing the box. "Some of these pieces are so beautiful. You should wear them more often." "I've been thinking about giving some of them to charity," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Jessica's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's very generous, but maybe you should wait until after we get your legal affairs organized. Make sure everything is properly documented for tax purposes." "Of course. We wouldn't want any tax complications." That evening, Jessica's chamomile tea tasted different, slightly bitter with an aftertaste that hadn't been there before. Instead of drinking it, I excused myself to use the bathroom and poured it down the sink. When I returned, Jessica was watching me expectantly. "Feeling sleepy yet? You usually start getting tired around this time." "I do feel a little drowsy. Maybe I'll head upstairs early tonight." I made a production of yawning and moving, slowly mimicking the drugged behavior they'd become accustomed to seeing. In my bedroom, I waited until the house grew quiet, then used my phone to research the symptoms of various sleeping medications. The bitter taste suggested they'd increased the dosage, probably because my apparent alertness during Detective Morrison's visit had worried them. If I'd actually consumed that cup of tea, I might have ended up in the emergency room with an overdose. The next morning, while Derek and Jessica were both out of the house, I called the medical alert company to request recordings from my device activation. They explained that as the account holder, I was entitled to copies of any audio captured during emergency activations. The recording was clearer than I'd hoped. Derek's voice demanding that I sign the power of attorney, Jessica's laughter about taking everything I owned. Even the sound of Derek unbuckling his belt came through distinctly. The timestamp proved the recording had been made moments before Detective Morrison arrived. I also called Harold Simpson's law office and scheduled an appointment for the following week. Harold agreed to meet me at his office during Derek's work hours, and he promised to review all the documents I'd photographed. "Amanda, I've been practicing elder law for 30 years, and what you're describing sounds like one of the most comprehensive abuse schemes I've encountered," Harold said during our phone conversation. "We need to move carefully to protect you while building a solid case." Harold explained that the power of attorney documents Derek wanted me to sign were unusually broad in scope. They would have given him authority to make medical decisions, financial decisions, and even housing decisions on my behalf, with virtually no oversight. Once you sign those papers, Derek could commit you to a locked memory care facility, and you'd have no legal recourse to challenge the placement. The full scope of their plan became clear. Derek and Jessica intended to have me declared incompetent, placed in institutional care, and stripped of all my assets. The reverse mortgage credit cards and power of attorney were just the first steps in a systematic plan to steal everything I owned. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated my ability to fight back. Harold Simpson's office occupied the second floor of a brick building downtown that had housed lawyers and accountants for over 50 years. The waiting room smelled like leather and old paper, familiar scents that reminded me of simpler times when legal matters involved wills and property transfers rather than protection from my own family. Harold emerged from his inner office looking exactly as I remembered him, tall and slightly stooped with white hair that never quite stayed combed and reading glasses that perpetually threatened to slide off his nose. His warm smile faltered when he saw the evidence I'd gathered. "Amanda, this is worse than I thought," he said after reviewing the photographs of forged documents. "Derek and Jessica have committed multiple felonies. The question is whether we can prove it in a way that will stand up in court." Harold had brought in a younger associate, Patricia Wells, who specialized in elder abuse cases. Patricia looked to be about 40 with short auburn hair and the kind of focused intensity that suggested she'd built her career on protecting vulnerable clients. "The medical alert recording is excellent evidence," Patricia explained, "but we need more. Courts want to see a pattern of abuse, not just a single incident." We developed a comprehensive plan to document Derek and Jessica's criminal behavior while keeping me safe. Harold arranged for a private investigator to install hidden cameras in my home's common areas. Patricia provided me with a small digital recorder to capture conversations. Most importantly, they helped me open new bank accounts and establish secure communication methods that Derek and Jessica couldn't monitor. "The key is to let them believe they're succeeding while we gather evidence," Harold advised. "The more confident they become, the more likely they are to make mistakes." I returned home that afternoon to find Derek and Jessica waiting in the living room with the power of attorney documents spread across the coffee table once again. "Mom, we really need to finish this paperwork today," Derek said without any preliminary pleasantries. "I've been getting calls from your credit card companies about late payments." That was interesting since I hadn't used credit cards in months and always paid my bills automatically through my bank. "What credit card companies?" I asked. Jessica consulted a notepad. "Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. It looks like you've fallen behind on several accounts." I knew those were the fraudulent accounts they'd opened in my name, but I played along with their deception. "I don't remember using those cards recently." "That's exactly the problem, Mom. Your memory isn't reliable anymore. That's why you need me to help manage your finances." Derek placed the pen in my hand again, but this time I was ready. Hidden in my sleeve was Patricia's tiny digital recorder capturing every word of their coercive behavior. "If I sign these papers, what exactly will you be able to do?" "Just the basics. Pay your bills, manage your investments, make sure you're getting proper medical care." "Could you sell my house?" Derek hesitated. "Only if it became necessary. Like if you needed to move to a care facility and we had to liquidate assets to pay for your treatment." "Could you access my bank accounts?" "Just to pay your expenses and manage your everyday needs." Every answer Derek gave was technically truthful, but deliberately misleading. The power of attorney documents would have given him unlimited access to everything I owned. "I'd like to think about this overnight," I said, setting down the pen. Derek's patience finally snapped. "Damn it, Mom, you've been thinking about it for weeks. How much more time do you need?" Jessica put a restraining hand on Derek's arm. "Let's not pressure her. But Amanda, you should know that delaying these decisions puts everyone in a difficult position." "What kind of difficult position?" "Well, if something happened to you tomorrow, we'd have no legal authority to handle your affairs. Your bills wouldn't get paid, your medications wouldn't get refilled, your house wouldn't be maintained." The implication was clear: sign the papers or face the consequences of deliberate neglect. That night, after consuming another cup of Jessica's drugged tea by pouring it into a potted plant when she wasn't looking, I listened to Derek and Jessica's latest conversation about their timeline. She's more resistant than she was last week, Jessica observed. Maybe we need to increase the dosage again. Any more and she might end up in the hospital. That detective is already suspicious. Then we move to phase 2 this weekend. The nursing home has a bed available and we've already signed the commitment papers. What about the power of attorney? We don't need it if she's declared mentally incompetent. The guardianship petition is already filed. My blood ran cold. They'd already filed papers to have me declared mentally incompetent, which would strip away my legal right to make decisions about my own life. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, just 5 days away. I spent the rest of that night reviewing the hidden camera footage Patricia had helped me access through a smartphone app. The recordings were damning Derek and Jessica discussing how much money they could get for my jewelry planning, which of my belongings to sell, first even joking about how easy it had been to drug me into submission. The most chilling footage showed Jessica researching funeral homes and burial costs, while Derek calculated how quickly they could liquidate my estate after I died. The next morning, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Instead of continuing to gather evidence, I was going to confront Derek and Jessica directly and force them to reveal the full scope of their plan. I've decided not to sign the power of attorney, I announced over breakfast. Derek's coffee cup clattered against his saucer. What do you mean? I mean I'm not signing any legal documents that I haven't had reviewed by my own attorney. Jessica's voice took on a dangerous edge. Amanda, you're not thinking clearly. That's exactly why you need Derek's help making these decisions. My thinking is perfectly clear. Clearer than it's been in months, actually. Derek stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. Mom, you don't understand what you're doing. If you don't let us help you, you're going to lose everything. Lose everything to whom? To the nursing home, to medical bills, to people who will take advantage of your confusion. People like you? The question hung in the air like the moment before lightning strikes. Derek's face flushed red while Jessica's went pale. They realized I wasn't confused anymore, wasn't compliant anymore, and wasn't going to be the easy victim they'd been counting on. What exactly are you accusing us of? Jessica demanded. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm simply stating that I won't sign any legal documents without proper legal representation. Derek took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. You ungrateful witch. After everything we've sacrificed to take care of you. What have you sacrificed, Derek? Your gambling money? Your shopping sprees? Jessica gasped. How did I find out about the credit cards you opened in my name, the reverse mortgage application you forged, the nursing home deposit you paid with my money? Derek lunged at me, then grabbing for my arm. You've been spying on us. I stepped back, keeping the kitchen island between us. I've been protecting myself. From what? From people who love you and want to help you? From people who have been drugging me, stealing from me, and planning to have me declared incompetent so you can steal everything I own. The mask of concern finally slipped completely from Derek's face. What remained was pure rage and desperation. You don't have any proof of anything, he snarled. I held up my phone, showing the audio recording app that had been running throughout our entire conversation. Actually, I have proof of everything. Derek stared at my phone with the expression of a man watching his entire world collapse. Jessica backed toward the kitchen door, calculating whether she could reach the landline before I could stop her. Give me that phone, Derek demanded, extending his hand. No. It was such a simple word, but the power behind it surprised all three of us. For months, I'd been compliant and agreeable, deferring to Derek's judgment about everything from my medication to my daily schedule. This version of Amanda, the one who said no and meant it was someone none of us had met before. Mom, you're not thinking rationally. I'm thinking more rationally than I have in months. That's what happens when people stop drugging your tea. Jessica's face went white. Nobody drugged anything. You're having paranoid delusions. Am I? Then you won't mind if we have my blood tested for sleeping medication, will you? Derek and Jessica exchanged a panicked glance. They both knew that traces of the drugs they'd been giving me would still be detectable in my system. We were trying to help you sleep better, Jessica admitted. You kept complaining about insomnia. I never complained about insomnia. I never had trouble sleeping until you started drugging me. Derek moved closer, his voice taking on the wheedling tone he'd used as a child when caught in misbehavior. Okay, maybe we made some mistakes, but everything we did was because we love you and want what's best for you. What's best for me or what's best for your gambling debts? His face flushed darker. How do you know about that? I know about the gambling. I know about Jessica's shopping addiction. I know about the reverse mortgage, the credit cards, the nursing home deposit. I know you've already filed guardianship papers to have me declared incompetent. Jessica bolted for the phone, but I was faster than my age suggested. Years of physical labor had kept my reflexes sharp, and desperation gave me speed I didn't know I still possessed. Don't even think about it. I warned, positioning myself between Jessica and the telephone. We're going to finish this conversation. Derek tried a different approach. Mom, let's all calm down and talk about this reasonably. Maybe we have made some mistakes, but we can fix them together. The only thing that needs fixing is my bank account, which you've been stealing from, and my credit rating, which you've been destroying, and my medical records, which you've been falsifying. We haven't falsified any medical records. I pulled out a folder I'd prepared earlier that morning. Really? Then how do you explain these reports to your insurance company claiming I have dementia, or these pharmacy records showing you've been picking up prescriptions I never requested? The evidence was overwhelming, and Derek knew it. His desperate attempts at explanation gave way to angry threats. Fine. You want to do this the hard way? Monday morning you'll be committed to Sunset Manor whether you cooperate or not. The guardianship hearing is already scheduled, and we have medical evidence of your incompetence. What medical evidence? Jessica smirked with renewed confidence. Dr. Morrison's evaluation from last month. He documented your confusion, memory loss, and inability to manage your own affairs. I'd never met with any doctor named Morrison, but Derek and Jessica had obviously arranged for some kind of fraudulent medical evaluation to support their guardianship petition. Show me this evaluation. Derek hesitated, then went to his bedroom and returned with a manila folder. The medical report inside was typed on official letterhead from a geriatric psychiatry practice I'd never visited. According to the report, I'd been evaluated 3 weeks earlier and found to be suffering from moderate dementia with episodes of paranoid delusion. The signature at the bottom belonged to Dr. Richard Morrison, a name I recognized from newspaper articles about medical professionals who'd lost their licenses for unethical practices. This is a fake report, I said after reading through the fabricated evaluation. Prove it. I will. I pulled out my phone again and dialed Detective Sarah Morrison's direct number. Derek tried to grab the phone, but I'd positioned myself near the back door where I could escape if necessary. Detective Morrison, this is Amanda Rodriguez. I need to report an immediate threat. My son and daughter-in-law are trying to force me to sign fraudulent legal documents, and they've threatened to have me committed based on a fake medical evaluation. Derek and Jessica could hear Detective Morrison's voice through the phone speaker, asking if I was in immediate physical danger. They haven't hurt me yet, but my son just threatened to have me committed on Monday whether I cooperate or not. Mrs. Rodriguez, can you leave the house safely right now? I think so. I want you to walk outside and wait for a patrol car. Officers are already en route to your location. Derek made one final desperate attempt to control the situation. Mom, hang up that phone and let's talk about this like adults. We're way past talking, Derek. You made your choice when you decided to steal from me instead of asking for help. I walked toward the back door, still talking to Detective Morrison. Derek followed his voice, becoming increasingly threatening. "If you go through with this, you'll destroy our family forever. You destroyed our family when you decided to drug me and steal everything I own. We're your family. We're the only family you have left." That statement revealed the core of Derek and Jessica's manipulation strategy. They'd systematically isolated me from friends, neighbors, and other relatives, then positioned themselves as my only source of support and connection. "You're not my family anymore. You're criminals who happen to share my DNA." The police sirens were audible in the distance, growing louder as they approached our neighborhood. Derek realized his last chance for control was slipping away. "You don't understand what you're doing. Those people I owe money to won't just hurt me. They'll come after you too." "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you gambled away money you didn't have." Jessica tried one final manipulation. "Amanda, think about what this will do to Derek. Prison will destroy him. Is that really what you want for your son?" The question was designed to trigger my maternal instincts, to make me prioritize Derek's welfare over my own safety and justice. For a moment, I almost wavered. 35 years of putting Derek's needs first doesn't disappear easily. But then I remembered the belt in Derek's hands, the terror in my chest as he threatened me with violence, and the cold calculation in Jessica's voice as she laughed about taking everything I owned. "What I want is for both of you to face the consequences of your choices." The police cars pulled into my driveway with lights flashing but sirens off. Through the kitchen window, I could see Detective Morrison climbing out of an unmarked sedan, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Derek made one last desperate grab for my phone, but I was already outside walking toward the police cars with evidence of fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy safely stored in my hand. Detective Morrison took my statement in the back of her unmarked car, while uniformed officers secured the scene inside my house. The digital recordings, hidden camera footage, and documented evidence of financial fraud painted a clear picture of systematic elder abuse. "Mrs. Rodriguez, what you've gathered here represents one of the most comprehensive elder abuse cases I've investigated," Detective Morrison explained as she reviewed my evidence. "The medical alert recording alone would be enough for assault charges, but the financial documentation shows this was a planned conspiracy." Through the car window, I watched Derek and Jessica being read their rights in my front yard. Neighbors emerged from their houses, drawn by the spectacle of police cars and flashing lights. Mrs. Chen from next door caught my eye and nodded approvingly, confirming my suspicion that she'd been the one to call in the original tip about elder abuse. Derek's face was a mask of rage and disbelief as the handcuffs closed around his wrists. He genuinely believed that his manipulation and control tactics would work indefinitely. The possibility that I might fight back had never seriously occurred to him. Jessica's reaction was different. She cried and begged the officers to understand that they'd been trying to help me. Her performance might have been convincing to someone who hadn't listened to months of her cold calculations about stealing my money and disposing of my belongings. "The search warrant should be processed within the hour," Detective Morrison told me. "We'll need to examine Derek's computer, Jessica's phone, and any financial records they've been keeping." Patricia Wells arrived shortly afterward, having been called by Detective Morrison as my attorney of record. She'd brought a victim's advocate and a social worker to ensure my immediate safety and long-term welfare were protected. "Amanda, you've done something incredibly brave today," Patricia said as we watched the crime scene technicians working through my house. "Most elder abuse cases are much harder to prosecute because victims don't have the evidence you've collected. The search of Derek and Jessica's belongings revealed evidence that went far beyond what I'd already discovered." Derek's computer contained emails discussing the timeline for my commitment to Sunset Manor, including conversations about how quickly they could liquidate my assets once I was declared incompetent. Jessica's phone showed text message conversations with friends about the expensive purchases she'd been making with my money. She'd even posted photos on social media showing off jewelry and clothing bought with fraudulent credit cards, providing time-stamped evidence of her spending sprees. Most damning was a notebook in Derek's handwriting that outlined their entire scheme step by step. The sleeping medication dosages, the timeline for isolating me from friends and family, even calculations about how much money they could steal before anyone noticed. "They've been planning this for over a year," Detective Morrison explained as she showed me Derek's notes. The gambling debts were just the catalyst that forced them to accelerate their timeline. The investigation expanded when detectives discovered Derek had been running similar schemes against two elderly relatives in other states. His uncle in Florida and Jessica's grandmother in Oregon had both been victimized using identical tactics: isolation medication, induced confusion, and financial exploitation. "This wasn't their first time," Patricia explained. "Derek and Jessica have been moving from state to state targeting vulnerable relatives and stealing their assets. You were just the next victim in a pattern of behavior." The financial analysis revealed the full scope of their theft. Beyond the credit cards and reverse mortgage application, Derek had been intercepting my Social Security checks for months and depositing them into accounts I couldn't access. Jessica had been systematically selling my belongings online and keeping the proceeds. "The total loss is probably close to $200,000, Detective Morrison told me. "But the good news is that most of it can be recovered through asset forfeiture and restitution orders." Derek's gambling debts created an additional complication. The people he owed money to weren't likely to accept his imprisonment as payment in full. Detective Morrison arranged for additional security measures to protect me during the investigation and trial process. "Your safety is our priority," she assured me. "Derek's creditors are known to pursue family members when the primary debtor becomes unavailable." The legal proceedings moved quickly once Derek and Jessica were formally charged. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the possibility of decades in prison, both of them accepted plea bargain agreements rather than risk trial. Derek received a 4-year sentence for elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Jessica got 3 years for her role in the scheme. Both were ordered to pay full restitution for the money they'd stolen, though recovering those funds would take time. The fake medical evaluation that Derek had planned to use in the guardianship hearing led to additional charges against the corrupt doctor who'd prepared it. Dr. Richard Morrison was already under investigation for similar fraudulent reports, and Derek's case provided the evidence needed to revoke his medical license permanently. "Justice doesn't always work this efficiently," Patricia told me as we reviewed the final settlement agreements. "The evidence you collected made prosecution inevitable, and Derek and Jessica knew they couldn't win at trial." 6 months after Derek and Jessica's arrest, I stood in the same kitchen where they'd threatened me with violence and forced me to sign fraudulent documents. But the house felt completely different now. The oppressive atmosphere of fear and manipulation had been replaced by a sense of peace and safety I'd almost forgotten was possible. The morning sun streamed through my kitchen windows as I prepared coffee for Margaret, who'd become a daily visitor during my recovery process. The simple act of making coffee without wondering if someone had tampered with it felt like a small miracle. "You look healthier than you have in years," Margaret observed as she settled into her usual chair at the kitchen table. She was right. The weight I'd lost during months of depression and medication had returned. The tremor in my hands that I'd attributed to arthritis had disappeared once I stopped consuming Derek's cocktail of sleeping pills. Most importantly, the fog that had clouded my thinking had completely lifted. I feel like I'm meeting myself again for the first time, I told her. The house had been thoroughly cleaned and redecorated since Derek and Jessica's arrest. I donated most of their belongings to charity and used some of the recovered funds to update the kitchen and living room. Every trace of their presence had been eliminated, creating space for new memories and new relationships. Detective Morrison stopped by regularly not for official business, but as a friend who'd become invested in my welfare. Her initial investigation had led to a broader task force targeting elder abuse throughout the county. Your case became our model for training other officers, she explained during one of her visits. The evidence you gathered showed us what victims can accomplish when they have the right support and resources. Patricia Wells had helped me establish the Amanda Rodriguez Elder Protection Foundation using funds recovered from Derek and Jessica's theft, along with my own contributions. The foundation provided legal assistance counseling services and emergency shelter for other elder abuse victims. Every week we get calls from people in situations similar to what you experienced, Patricia told me as we reviewed the foundation's first quarterly report. Having your story to share gives them hope that they can fight back too. The Foundation's first major project was partnering with local law enforcement to create an elder abuse prevention program. We visited senior centers, community groups, and retirement communities to educate older adults about recognizing and reporting financial exploitation. The most important message is that age doesn't make you powerless. I explained to audiences during my speaking engagements. Derek and Jessica succeeded for as long as they did because they convinced me I was too old and too confused to protect myself. Harold Simpson had returned from semi-retirement to serve as the Foundation's legal counsel. His expertise in elder law made him invaluable in developing resources for victims who needed immediate legal protection. What Derek and Jessica did to you is more common than most people realize, Harold explained during one of our planning meetings. Adult children financially exploiting their parents' accounts for billions of dollars in losses every year. The Foundation also partnered with medical professionals to create screening protocols for detecting medication abuse in elderly patients. The systematic drugging I'd experienced was a tactic used by many financial predators to control their victims. Your case led to policy changes at 3 major hospital systems, Dr. Patricia Williams from the Geriatric Medicine Program told me. We now have mandatory reporting requirements when elderly patients show signs of unexplained cognitive decline. 1 year after Derek and Jessica's conviction, I received an unexpected letter from Derek in prison. He'd written to apologize and ask for my forgiveness, claiming that desperation had driven him to make choices he regretted. I spent several days considering how to respond. The maternal part of me that had always wanted to protect Derek felt sympathy for his situation. But the part of me that had survived his abuse recognized the letter as another manipulation attempt. You don't owe him forgiveness, Patricia advised when I showed her the letter. Forgiveness is something you give yourself, not something you owe to people who've harmed you. I ultimately decided not to respond to Derek's letter. Engaging with his attempts to re-establish contact would only give him another opportunity to manipulate my emotions and potentially interfere with my recovery. Jessica had been released after serving 18 months of her 3-year sentence. She'd moved back to her home state and was reportedly working as a cashier while living with her parents. I occasionally wondered if she'd learned anything from her experience, or if she was simply looking for her next victim. The Elder Abuse Task Force that Detective Morrison led had investigated over 50 cases in its first year, leading to dozens of arrests and millions of dollars in recovered assets. My case had provided the template for recognizing and prosecuting financial exploitation schemes. What you accomplished has protected hundreds of other potential victims, Detective Morrison told me during the task force's anniversary celebration. Derek and Jessica's network was much larger than we initially realized. The investigation had revealed that Derek and Jessica were part of a loose network of relatives and acquaintances who shared information about vulnerable elderly targets. The FBI had opened a multi-state investigation into what appeared to be an organized elder abuse ring. 2 years after my ordeal began, I stood before an audience of social workers, law enforcement officers, and victim advocates at the National Elder Justice Conference. My presentation was titled, "From Victim to Advocate: How Documentation and Determination Can Defeat Elder Abuse." The most important lesson I learned is that being a victim is a temporary condition, I told the audience. Derek and Jessica thought they could control me because I was old and trusting. They were wrong about the trusting part, and they completely misunderstood what being old really means. The audience laughed appreciatively, but I was serious about the distinction. Age had given me perspective, patience, and strategic thinking skills that younger people often lack. Once I understood what Derek and Jessica were doing, I was able to outmaneuver them because I had decades of experience solving problems and making difficult decisions. Elder abuse succeeds when victims believe they're powerless. The moment you realize you have options, you stop being a victim and become a survivor. After my presentation, a woman in her 70s approached me with tears in her eyes. "My daughter has been stealing from me for years," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do because I didn't want to get her in trouble." I spent an hour talking with her about resources, legal options, and the importance of prioritizing her own safety over family loyalty. By the end of our conversation, she had Detective Morrison's contact information and a plan for documenting her daughter's theft. "You've given me hope," she said as we parted. "I thought I was trapped." "Nobody is ever trapped," I replied. "Sometimes we just need help seeing the door." That evening, as I returned to my quiet house and my peaceful life, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from victim to advocate. Derek and Jessica had intended to steal my money, my independence, and my dignity. Instead, they'd accidentally given me a purpose that was more fulfilling than anything I'd experienced during my retirement. The foundation now employed 6 full-time staff members and operated 3 emergency shelters for elder abuse victims. We'd helped over 200 families navigate the legal system and recover stolen assets. Most importantly, we'd created a network of survivors who supported each other through the healing process. My house once, a prison of fear and manipulation, had become a sanctuary where other survivors came to share their stories and plan their futures. The kitchen table where Derek had threatened me with violence now hosted support group meetings and planning sessions for advocacy campaigns. I kept Derek's belt, the one he'd used to threaten me, in a frame on my office wall. Not as a reminder of trauma, but as a symbol of the moment I decided to fight back. Visitors often asked about it, and I used it to illustrate the difference between being a victim and being victimized. Being victimized is something that happens to you, I would explain. Being a victim is a choice you make about how to respond. As I prepared for bed on the 2nd anniversary of Derek and Jessica's arrest, I thought about the woman from the conference who was just beginning her own journey from victim to survivor. Tomorrow, I would call her to check on her progress and remind her that she wasn't alone. The phone rang just as I was turning off the lights. The caller ID showed Detective Morrison's number. "Amanda, I hope I'm not calling too late. We just arrested a man in Phoenix who was running a scam identical to Derek and Jessica's scheme. He had a notebook with your case details in it, apparently using your son's methods as a blueprint." "How did you catch him?" "His victim's granddaughter attended your presentation last month. She recognized the warning signs and called us before any money was stolen." I smiled in the darkness. The circle of protection and education continued to expand, reaching people I would never meet, but whose lives were changed by the decision I'd made to fight back rather than submit. One more predator off the streets, I said. Thanks to you, Detective Morrison replied. Your courage to speak out has prevented dozens of crimes we'll never even know about. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen looking at the spot where Derek had doubled his belt and demanded my submission. The fear and confusion I'd felt in that moment seemed like memories from someone else's life. Derek and Jessica had tried to convince me that I was powerless, confused, and alone. They were wrong on all counts. I was powerful enough to gather evidence and build a case that sent them to prison. I was clear-headed enough to outthink their manipulation and expose their crimes. And I was connected to a community of people who believed in justice and supported each other through difficult times. The ending they'd planned for my story involved my death in a neglectful care facility after they'd stolen everything I'd worked for during my lifetime. The ending I'd written for myself involved their imprisonment and my transformation into an advocate for other vulnerable people. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I thought about the question I always posed at the end of my presentations. When someone tries to steal your dignity, your independence, and your voice, what will you do? For me, the answer had been simple. I fought back and I won. Have you or someone you know ever experienced financial manipulation from family members? How important do you think it is for older adults to maintain their independence and make their own financial decisions? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about people who refuse to be victims. And please share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening, and remember, your age is your wisdom, not your weakness.